Okay, I'm getting right into this. Hello and welcome. This is Trusting Through Trials. My name is Kyla Inez, and I am the host of this podcast. Today's episode is called I Can't See God as Good, in quotation marks, specifically because it was something that I used to struggle with. I not only couldn't see God as good, but I full on saw him as cruel. And I couldn't understand because I was like, God, you are a good God, but why do you seem so evil or cruel? And I was like, this makes no sense because God says that he is the same God yesterday, today, and forever. However, the Old Testament God seems so much more harsh than the New Testament God. And I was like, it doesn't make sense to me. And I really struggled with it because as hard as I would try, I couldn't see God as good with some of the things that he had done or would allow. And so I wanted to talk about that today because it was something that I struggled with for so long, and I know that I'm not the only one who has struggled with that or will struggle with that, and so I want to talk about it. But before I get started, I want to say I am not a biblical scholar. I don't know. I don't know everything perfectly. I haven't even read the whole Bible yet. I do my best, and I want to share God's word for how he intended it, but I'm not perfect, and I might make mistakes, and I do make mistakes, and for that reason, if anything feels off, please double check in your word for yourself, and just talk to God. Okay. But today I wanna read Jonah, because that was actually a big one for me that helped me to see God for who he was. I need to take a moment. I've never just full on jumped into an episode that fast. I literally hit the record button, jumped on my bed, and started. I had already been praying, but usually I take quite a bit of time to just and prepare myself mentally, but I didn't do that. I just was like, okay, I'm just gonna start, and I just started going right away. I jumped on the bed and started going. So, yes. Okay, I'm just gonna quickly take a moment now. Okay, so there is a difference. I feel like, I do feel like it could be super easy to go into why does God allow bad things to happen to good people, or why do bad things happen if God is so good. That could be a whole different episode in and of itself, and it's gonna be kind of hard for me to not merge them, but I feel like, holy smokes, this would be a long episode if I went into both. I do have a lot to say on why God allows bad things to happen, but for right now, I'm gonna try and keep it focused on seeing God as who he is and seeing him as good when we can't. Because, I couldn't. And I was a Christian, and I was saved, and I still was like, God, I cannot see you as good when I'm reading the Old Testament. This all seems so cruel and inhumane. How could you do this? There are kids. That's the main thing I was struggling with. I was like, what about the kids? Times where it was because of the man and him being the leader of that home, and I was like, okay, but what about the rest of the family? I was like, why did the whole family have to suffer, or things like that, or why did a whole city have to suffer? What about the kids? And there was one story, I don't remember exactly what it's called, but there was one story that I really struggled with because the father did something wrong, and then the whole family was stoned for it. And I was like, I couldn't wrap around my head of why God allowed that to happen and why that happened. Okay, I've never actually had to voice over while editing, but basically what I was saying here was I really was struggling with the story, and it's actually from Joshua chapter 7. And basically the whole family suffered because the father stole when the Lord said not to. And I said that I had talked to someone who was leading a part of a conference about this specifically. And he was saying, well, God didn't actually tell the people to stone him and burn the whole family. But then I just went and reread chapter 7 because I was like, I don't know. I feel like I'm still remembering it differently. So I went and reread it. And I can't fully tell what God is saying, but to me, it is still God saying to get rid of him and what belongs to him, and what belongs to him also does include his family. And so for this story in particular, it is something that I just have to trust God for, and just know that he knows what is right and that he is loving, and he wouldn't do something like this for no reason. And I'm not 100% sure about this story, so I would say go and read it for yourself, because it is a tricky one, and it isn't one that I feel like I have time to go in depth for because I'm just voicing over. But yeah, definitely go and read it and try and find context for it. I'm definitely going to try and go and do a deeper dive. But yep, okay, going back to the podcast. Okay, wait, first, actually, before getting back into it, I do think it is a story that shows that our actions have consequences, and when God tells us not to do something and we disobey that, then we're not always going to get away with it. We're not. That's just reality, and it was a moment where God showed that, as you can't get away with everything. When I tell you no, it's a no. Yeah, also though, the podcast is going to resume in kind of a random spot because I had to clip out a big section and then voice over to explain. Yep, okay, sorry. Now back to the podcast. In a lot of these stories, it is actually man choosing to do it and man choosing to do it rather than God. And we need to know and see that the world is flawed and the world isn't always good, which is very known. Like, it's easy to see that the world isn't good and there's a lot of wrong in the world. And like I said, this could be really easy to go into why does God allow bad things to happen. Whole different episode. I could go so deep into that. Yeah, but also context matters, because I would read a lot of stuff and I wouldn't read it with context, and then I would be like, okay, what? I was like, see, God can only be seen as cruel here. And I was like, this, why? Like, he should have been more merciful. But then it's like, no, Kyla, read it with context. Read it with seeing why he did that and what was really going on in the hearts of the people. And then it's like, okay. So something I realized is if you are reading something without the proper context, well, then you're reading it without the proper context, and you won't see it as it's truly intended to be read, or for it to be seen by God. So that was another thing, is I think that part of me, not always, but part of me when reading things, I was struggling and I was just getting into my faith, and a part of me I don't think wanted to see God as good. I don't totally know why, but I know that I would read it and I would see God as cruel, and it would confuse me, but a part of me wanted to see him that way. Again, I can't remember why, but that is another thing, is if you are looking for God in scripture to be cruel and looking and being like, it's an evil God, and reading the Bible that way, then no, you won't always see that, because God is so merciful. But sometimes, yes. If you read the Bible looking and being like God is cruel, you will see a cruel God. And it's like, well, that doesn't make sense. Why would you say that? Well, because that's not the truth. But if you're looking and seeing and wanting to see that, you will. because you will see what you want to see. But if you look with the proper context and you are truly wanting to know what it is and why he is doing those things, then you can't see him that way. You can't. If you really look in full context, no matter what story it is, at God's point of view and why God did or allowed something, you can't see him as a cruel God. And no, I haven't read the full Bible, but I believe it to be true for the whole Bible. Is when you're really looking at who God is, you will see who God is. And God isn't cruel. He isn't evil. He is who he says he is, and he is a good God, and he is a merciful God, and God is also just. And that is something we need to remember, is he is a just God. Yes, he is merciful, and he is a merciful God, but God is also a just God. And if we did not have a just God, what would be the point in following him if he never disciplined or punished us when we did something wrong? Then we could just go on living our lives as sinful as we wanted with no consequence and still go to heaven even if we didn't know him. And no, we don't have to do works to get into heaven, no. But our lives will be changed if we are living for God. And if he never did anything to punish those who are living in full darkness or sin, that he knows will not change, or if there was never any knowing of punishment, then why would we even try? Why would we have any respect for God? Why would we ever follow God if there was no punishment for wrongs? Because then we would just live however we wanted. We would go partying, sleep around, get drunk, steal, lie, all the things. We would just do it so freely. And we wouldn't even care to know our Father. Because we would still get to go to heaven. God is merciful, but he is also just. That was something that my boyfriend actually brought to my attention, was that, and he told me that, and I was like, that's a really good point, is why would we follow him? He's not doing it to be cruel, but he's doing it because he loves the world. He loves his creation. And if you're like, the world? What do you mean? I mean, he loves the world. He created every single one of us, even if we're not saved. And that is why there is his mercy. And that is why he died. For God so loved the world that he sent his one and only Son. For whoever believes in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. We just have to repent and know God, and that's all it takes. That's all it takes to get to be with him, and we don't have to do anything more. Again, we will, because our lives will be changed, so then we will want to do good and we will want to follow him because of what he did for us. But it is by grace that we are saved. And that same loving God was the same God in the Old Testament. He's the same loving God. And that is why Jonah personally helped me to really see God for who he was, even in the Old Testament. Yes, I think you could see God for who he is in any of these stories. But for me personally, it was Jonah. So I would like to read Jonah. It is a short book. It's only 2 pages in my Bible. I will be reading NIV, and I do want to read the whole thing so that you can get the full picture and you can see God's grace and his love in many aspects of Jonah. So that is why I would like to read it. Okay. I already don't know how to pronounce this, so just saying I'm not a perfect reader either, and I'm not good with the names in the Bible. I know a lot of people can relate to that, but some people are really good with them. I'm not. So if this is one I should know, I'm sorry about that. I don't. And I will probably pronounce names wrong. Okay. The word of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. But Jonah ran away from the Lord and headed for Tarshish. He went down to Joppa, where he found a ship bound at the port. After paying the fare, he went aboard and sailed for Tarshish to flee from the Lord. Then the Lord sent a great wind on the sea, and such a violent storm arose that the ship threatened to break up. All the sailors were afraid, and each cried out to his own God. And they threw the cargo into the sea to lighten the ship. But Jonah had gone below deck, where he lay down and fell into a deep sleep. The captain went to him and said, "How can you sleep? Get up and call on your God. Maybe he will take notice of us so that we will not perish." Then the sailors said to each other, "Come, let's cast lots to find out who is responsible for this calamity." They cast lots, and the lot fell on Jonah. So they asked him, "Tell us, who is responsible for making all of this trouble for us? What kind of work do you do? Where do you come from? What is your country? From what people are you?" He answered, "I am a Hebrew, and I worship the Lord, the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land." This terrified them, and they asked, "What have you done?" They knew he was running away from the Lord, because he had already told them so. The sea was getting rougher and rougher. So they asked him, "What should we do to you to make the sea come down for us?" "Pick me up and throw me into the sea," he replied, "and it will become calm. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you." Instead, the men did their best to row back to land, but they could not, for the sea had grew even wilder than before. Then they cried out to the Lord, "Please, Lord, do not let us die for taking this man's life. Do not hold us accountable for killing an innocent man, for you, Lord, have done as you pleased." Then they took Jonah and threw him overboard, and the raging sea grew calm. At this, the men greatly feared the Lord, and they offered a sacrifice to the Lord and made vows to him. Now the Lord provided a huge fish to swallow Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. From inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord his God. He said, "In my distress I called to the Lord, and he answered me. From deep in the realm of the dead I called for help, and you listened to my cry. You hurled me into the depths, into the very heart of the seas, and the currents swirled about me. All your waves and breakers swept over me. I said, I have been banished from your sight, yet I will look again toward your holy temple. The engulfing waters threatened me, the deep surrounded me. Seaweed was wrapped around my head. To the roots of the mountains I sank down. The earth beneath buried me in forever. But you, Lord my God, brought my life up from the pit. When my life was ebbing away, I remembered you, Lord. And my prayer rose to you, to your holy temple. Those who cling to worthless idols turn away from God's love for them. But I, with shouts of grateful praise, will sacrifice to you what I have vowed. I will make good. I will say, salvation comes from the Lord. And the Lord commanded the fish, and it vomited Jonah to dry land. Okay, this was just the first 2 chapters, but you can see God's mercy in this part already. God told Jonah to go to Nineveh. His first reaction was no. And he fled. And he was like, I don't want to do that. So he ran in the opposite direction of Nineveh, going to Tarshish. And because of that, God was not happy with him. And so then he sent a storm. And the sailors then ended up, after battling their own thoughts, being like, it's wrong. We shouldn't just kill this man. After realizing what they had to do, they threw him into the sea, and instead of God allowing Jonah to die, he sent a fish to swallow Jonah. And after 3 days and 3 nights in that fish, God told the fish to spit him out onto dry land. So even though he ran from God, God gave him another chance and was merciful to him. He did not take Jonah's life, but he saved it and gave him a second chance. Okay. So now chapter 3 and 4. Okay. Then the word of the Lord came to Jonah a second time. Go to the great city of Nineveh and proclaim to it the message I give you. Jonah obeyed the word of the Lord and went to Nineveh. Now Nineveh was a very large city. It took 3 days to go through it. Jonah began by going a day's journey into the city, proclaiming, 40 more days and Nineveh will be overthrown. Then the Ninevites believed God. A fast was proclaimed, and all of them, from the greatest to the least, put on sackcloth. Okay, I read this and was intrigued and interested as to what sackcloth was. I was like, okay, what is sackcloth? Why did they put it on? I don't remember exactly what it was made out of. It might have been goat's hair. Could be totally wrong. I think it was a type of animal hair. Anyways, super itchy and uncomfy. It kind of looks like a potato sack. So super uncomfortable. So everyone was fasting, not eating, and they put on sackcloth, super uncomfortable, itchy, to show their repentance. And yeah, okay. Resuming at verse 6. Chapter 3, verse 6, when Jonah's warnings reached the king of Nineveh, he rose from his throne, took off his royal robes, covered himself with sackcloth, and sat down in the dust. This is the proclamation he issued in Nineveh. By the decree of the king and his nobles, do not let people or animals, herd or flocks, taste anything. Do not let them eat or drink. But let people and animals be covered with sackcloth. Let everyone call urgently on God. Let them give up their evil ways and their violence. Who knows? God may yet relent and with compassion turn from his fierce anger so that we will not perish. Okay, and here's another thing. Is they all chose and realized their evilness and their wickedness, and they knew what they had done, and they knew that they had to change their ways when they heard that they were going to be overthrown. they weren't like, oh, we didn't do that, we don't deserve that, what? Or what are you saying? They were just like, oh no, we're gonna get what's coming to us. And they decided to fast and to put on sackcloth in order to show their repentance. But that wasn't even something God told them to do. He didn't tell them, okay, now if you don't want me to do this, then you have to fast and you have to put on sackcloth. He didn't tell them to do that. That was their own choice in showing God that they were sorry. So that was another thing, that it's like, that wasn't God, that was the people and their choosing. Okay. Continuing on from verse 10. When God saw what they did and how they turned from their evil ways, he relented and did not bring on them the destruction he had threatened. But to Jonah, this seemed very wrong. He became angry. He prayed to the Lord, "Isn't this what I said? Lord, when I was still at home, this is what I tried to forestall by fleeing to Tarshish. I knew that you were a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity. Now, Lord, take away my life, for it is better for me to die than to live." But the Lord replied, "Is this right for you to be angry?" Jonah had gone out and sat down at a place east of the city. There he made himself a shelter, sat in its shade, and waited to see what would happen to the city. Then the Lord provided a leafy plant. He made it grow up over Jonah to give shade for his head, to ease his discomfort, and Jonah was very happy about the plant. But at dawn the next day, God provided a worm which chewed the plant so that it withered. When the sun rose, God providing a scorching east wind, and the sun blazed on Jonah's head, so that he grew faint. He wanted to die, and said, "It would be better for me to die than to live." But God said to Jonah, "Is this right for you to be angry about the plant?" "It is," he said, "and I am so angry I wish I were dead." But the Lord said, "You have been concerned about this plant, though you did not tend it or make it grow. It sprang up overnight and died overnight. And should I not have concern for the great city of Nineveh, in which there were more than 120,000 people who cannot tell their right hand from their left, and also many animals?" And that is where it ends. That is where it ends. We don't hear the rest of that story, like what happened afterwards. But what we can see here is Jonah knew from the start who God was. And we see that he ran because he knew that God was going to be merciful if they turned from their ways, and he wasn't going to bring the destruction on them that he had planned if they turned from their ways. And God was saying that there were more than 120,000 people who lived there. And Jonah said in chapter 4, verse 2, "You are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love, a God who relents from sending calamity." God doesn't want to send calamity if he doesn't have to, and if people repent, he is gracious towards that, and he does give second chances. Now there is a time in the very end, on Judgment Day, when there will be no more second chances, but that's because so many chances were given. And God is a gracious, compassionate, he is slow to anger, he is abounding in love, and he relents from sending calamity. And this mind you, is the God of the Old Testament. Sounds kind of like the God of the New Testament. That's because he's the same God. And if you look at the Bible for who God is, you will see that. And then with the plant that grew, God gave that plant for Jonah for shade, even though Jonah was angry with God. And because of how Jonah's attitude was towards God, then God allowed a worm to eat it, and also to show Jonah that the power that God has, and how, like, what did Jonah do to give himself shade? He didn't do anything. God has power to control everything. The winds, the seas, the heat, the everything. He can control it all. He has the power to do so. And he cares for us, and he loves us. But when we are doing wrong, he wants us to see that, so that we can change and do better, because he loves us, and he doesn't want us living like that. So then that is why I really like Jonah, because it is in the Old Testament, and you can really see who God is. You can see his love and his mercy, and how he was planning on destroying all of these people. And you might be like, okay, so he saved them now, but what about all those times he destroyed whole cities? Or whole whatever it was, when he sent the flood on the entire earth, and only Jonah and his family were saved. What about then? What about all these other times where God did not spare the people? Well, God knew their hearts. God can see, and this is a moment where we need to trust God and trust his foreknowledge, and recognize his sovereignty and how he is all-knowing and all-powerful. He is in control of the whole universe. He created everything. He made each and every one of us. None of us deserve life. The only reason we have life and if we are saved, get to go to heaven, is through grace, and is because of Jesus. But without Jesus, we all deserve death. All of us, each and every single one of us. And why did these people not receive mercy? Well, they had their whole lives to. They had their whole lives to follow God, and they didn't, and they were being so evil that God had to wipe them out. And this is where I would be like, what about the kids though? What about the babies? What about them? And this might be a silly analogy, but I like to picture it as the evil is, let's say, a moldy strawberry. And there is all these good strawberries. But the moldy strawberry is in the center of all these good strawberries. And all these new strawberries could be freshly picked strawberries. They're here. Those are the babies. Those are the kids. But their parents are moldy strawberries who have gone rotten, gone bad. There's no hope for them. You can't eat them. They're not going to change back to fresh. And they have already chosen not to live for God, and there was no changing their hearts. And you might be like, but what if there was? Well, that's where we need to know our God and to trust in him and be like, okay, if he did this, this is because he knows that they decided, they made their choice, and they weren't going to choose him. He's a God of second chances, and if he did this, then he knew they weren't going to change their ways. And then when there is a moldy strawberry amongst fresh ones that you might be like, those fresh strawberries have so much time before they go bad. They're still good. Well, not if they've been contaminated with a moldy strawberry. And that moldy strawberry, if it is not removed, there is no chance for the good strawberries on the out and surrounding it, because soon it will all be contaminated by moldy strawberries and they will all go moldy. And so these kids that are babies that were in these cities were only surrounded by their parents who were moldy strawberries. And they would grow up to be moldy strawberries. They would become moldy strawberries early on. And you might be like, how do you know? People aren't actually moldy strawberries. Well, this is just my analogy, but I think it's a way that helps me to see, okay, God had to remove these cities, because if he didn't, the mold would just go crazy. He had to remove all the mold and all that was touching it, because when they got touched with the mold, the fresh strawberries, they weren't fresh for very long. Those babies, those kids, you need to recognize God's foreknowledge, and he knows and he sees. If there was any chance for them not to be, he would have saved those lives, but he didn't, because he knew. And it can be hard to wrap my head around that sometimes, but that's where I need to just trust God and know that he is good and he is who he says he is. There's another Bible verse. I don't remember exactly where it is. But I believe, and I could be wrong, because I feel like I did try and re-look it up and I realized it was kind of different than I remember. So I could be wrong, but I believe there's a Bible verse that says that God doesn't enjoy bringing pain or wrath on people. He doesn't enjoy punishing. He doesn't enjoy it. He does it because he knows it's what needs to be done. And if he could prevent it, he does. He gives mercy, and he is gracious because he loves. And there's so many places in the Bible that you could read. I just started reading Isaiah with my boyfriend, and we have just read the first chapter so far. But even in the first chapter, you can see who God is. It's really good. It's really good. I highly recommend. Yeah, you can see who God is, and you can see his love and his mercy on the people, on his people, and it really shows who God is. Also in Hebrews, we also just read Hebrews. Hebrews is also really good. I also want to read a verse from Hebrews, actually. I would like to read a verse from Hebrews and one from Malachi. I'm going to first read the one from Malachi. So I've got to go and find it. Hold on, okay, I found Malachi, and I realized I don't know if I've actually read it. I just know the one verse, and when I read the verse, I was like, oh, it's a little longer than I thought it was. Normally, I don't have verses prepared without looking at the context first. I like to always look at context before I write verses down, but I didn't do this one time, and so I was like, okay, before I actually say it, I want to look at the context of this verse, and holy smokes, Malachi would be a really good book to read on this topic, I think. I don't know, I haven't read the whole thing, but I was reading part of it, and I was like, okay, this seems like it's a really good one for this topic. So I would recommend reading it. I'm probably gonna go. I will. Not probably. I'm gonna read it after this. Not probably the whole thing in one day. I could, because it's small, but I like to take my time and go through it slowly. But I'm probably gonna read this one. Probably gonna read this one real soon. Because it's very interesting to me. And I think it would be a really good one on this topic. Anywho, the verse I wanted to read was from Malachi chapter 3, verse 6. It says, I, the Lord, do not change. So you, the descendants of Jacob, are not destroyed. Like, again, you would have to read the whole thing. But the main part of it that I wanted to read was the I, the Lord, do not change. I think it is very important. He doesn't change. He doesn't. He's always been the same. When he was just him, when he created the world, when it was in the Old Testament, to who he was in the New Testament, and to who he is now, he never changed. He was always the same God. And I like that verse because it's a verse that says that he does not change in the Old Testament. And then I like the one in Hebrews because it is saying the same thing and it's in the New Testament. And so then there's a verse from the Old and the New that both say that God does not change. Okay, the one from Hebrews is Hebrews 13 verse 8. It says, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. He does not change. He is the same as he has always been and will be. And so I like those verses because it shows that God's the same. He's the same God throughout the whole Bible and throughout our whole lives. And then, the topic of why does he allow bad things to happen? Whole nother thing. I hope to do a podcast on it one day. It is not one that I'm currently soon planning on doing, but I do hope to do one on that one day. Maybe it will be a soon one. I don't know. Now that these are a month apart, it does give more time to think. But yeah, we will see. We'll see what God does. And yeah, okay. I did want to go over, I think, 2 things before I end this. Okay, just one thing. I have it in my notes. I actually didn't look at them too much as I thought I would. I still looked at them a bit, but anyways. Going back to if you are looking for a bad God, you will find a bad God, and context is important. What I like to do, even still, but what I liked to do when I was first trying to understand who God was I would pray. I would pray and I would ask God, I would be like, God, please show me what you are really meaning here, what your intentions are, like what your heart is. Help me to see and know you for who you really are. And help me to read this in the way that it should be read and is supposed to be read. And help me to read it with the right context. And I would just pray. And be like, God, please just let me see your word how it is intended to be read. And help me to see you for who you really are. And that's what I would pray. And I wouldn't try and look for him as a bad God. I also wouldn't try to look for him as a good God. I'd just try and look for who he was. And I think that is the best way to go about it, is because when you look for him for who he really is, you will see him for who he really is. And that is a loving and merciful God. And it's not always easy. And it can take time for sure. But I just wanted to share just wanted to share what I learned and what helped me with this, because it was something that I had struggled with for quite a while. So yeah, that was today's episode. I hope it helped somebody, and there was something to take away from it. But yeah, if you made it to the end, thank you so much for watching. Anyways, hope you have an amazing day. Okay. I'll see you in a month.